Green's video. It's kind of this hierarchical society where each guy each person is responsible for respecting people above and below them, right? And the point is that the focus is not on the individual, but the point is that the focus is on all these relationships kind of functioning in unison, right? So in other words, you are called to respect those both above you and below you, right? In the way that so in other words, it's not about you, it's about the group, the community, right? And the example, and I want you to be able to talk about this because this helps Confucianism make perfect sense. Confucianism says look one of those key relationships is between ruler and citizen. Okay? Ruler and citizen. And he says the citizen, pause. The citizen, his responsibility is to obey the ruler and to be a great citizen, right? Obey the ruler. The ruler's responsibility is to respect the citizen and to be as good of a ruler as he possibly can, to be the best ruler he can be, to be a just and fair ruler. So if that makes sense, the focus is not on you go do whatever you want to do and whatever. The focus is on what's your role in this community? What's your job? What's your responsibility in this group, right? Does that kind of make sense? You remember that? Confucianism? Yes. So society is governed by a hierarchical structure of relationships, right? People have responsibility to the people below them and above them and the duty to respect them, right? So then we said, how is Confucianism consistent with collectivistic culture? I love this question because this is college-y language and y'all are in 6th grade. All right? How is that consistent with, how is collectivistic culture, how is Confucianism consistent with collectivistic culture and those values? And the emphasis, the focus, I mean, if you understand the word consistent, which we need to talk about a little bit because we had some problems with that the other day, which is fine. Consistent means how do these things go together? Cultural values of collectivism, and then you got political beliefs of Confucianism. Those two things are different, but they go hand in hand. And I'm saying, how are they consistent? How do these two things merge and kind of go hand in hand together, right? And so the point is, what's consistent about them? What's consistent about this thing that says that society should be governed by relationships? Everybody has the responsibility to those relationships, aka to the group. The focus is the group working together. And then collectivistic values, where generally speaking, the focus of society is on the group, not on the individuals. So I say, how are those consistent? And you say, well, if you listen to the language, they sound very similar, right? They both focus on the group, right? Does that make sense? So the simple answer to that question is, it sounds so official. What is Confucianism and how is it consistent with the values of a collectivistic culture? I mean, that's an intelligent question. The answer is simple because they both focus on the group, right? How do they do that? Collectivistic culture will focus on the group. Confucianism are all about these relationships. It's all about the society functioning together as a group. Does that make sense? So you can pause the video if you want to write that down or whatnot. We're keeping this way simple, by the way. Okay. The last thing that we kind of came to, do you understand consistent, by the way? Does that make sense? If you don't, two totally different things, but how do they go together, right? What are two different concepts, but how are they consistent? Well, they both focus on the group, right? Last thing is I want to talk about communism, okay? And we kept this so simple, and the point of keeping it really simple is to get a basic understanding, but also so that you really do understand how these collective values translate into government too, and why people in a different country think differently than you would. Okay, and so this is kind of cool. When we break down what is communism, it's a form of government. So you have a communist government. A government is communist, right? It's a form of government, but what communism basically means is it's a form of government where there's no private property. The government owns everything, and there's very few to no personal freedoms, right? And so we broke those things down. So we break it down and said, what's communism? It's a form of government where you have no private property, no no personal freedoms, right? And the government owns pretty much everything. I mixed up the order there. And so then we paused and we said, that's kind of, we didn't go that in depth with that, but then we paused and we said, well, how is that consistent with collectivistic values? And so, and how's it consistent with Confucianist values? Well, if you think about it, it's not, the focus is, again, the simple answer, like really intelligent question, really simple answer, the focus is not on the individual. If there's very few personal freedoms, the focus is not on the individual, right? No private, you don't own that house, the government does. You don't, you don't have the freedom to speak out against the government like you do in a democratic country like America or a Western civilization. We have freedom of speech. You don't have those personal freedoms because the emphasis is not on the individual to be able to speak his or her mind. The emphasis is on the group. And if you tie it with Confucianism really tight, you're called to respect the government, and they're called to respect you in return and lead you well and fairly. And that's kind of the premise of a communist government specifically in a country where they, like in the East, where they value the group and collectivistic values. So I told you my story from China. It's really strange. I mean, in China, they think that, I said this is generally speaking, but after talking to people in the streets, they think communist government is awesome, right? Which we're like, it's kind of strange. But why do they think it's awesome? Because in their mindset, their value set based on their culture forever is that it's all about the group anyways. You don't have a lot of personal freedoms. It'd be weird to just bash your government like we do in America. And so they trust that they respect the government, and the government's going to in turn respect them and rule fairly. That's a hugely broad generalization, and it's not like 100% true across the board, but basically, and for our understanding, we can make that argument. We can say, what's communism, and why is it consistent with collectivistic culture? Communism is a form of government that limits personal freedoms. There's no private property. The government owns everything. Well, it's consistent with collectivistic culture because there's the focus isn't on the individual. The focus is on the group. How's it consistent with Confucianism? Because that fully engages this citizen and ruler relationship where the citizen obeys the ruler and the ruler rules fairly, Hopefully this makes sense, okay? If you have any questions, email me tonight. I'm trying to keep this as simple as possible, the fewest definitions, and so if you have kind of a short definition you can play with, and you can play with it, you can really compare it and align it with and talk about it next to other things like how is this consistent with this, which is consistent with this, tell me about it, right? So for the quiz tomorrow, I really want you to be able to talk confidently about those different things, okay? If you have any questions, email me tonight. I'll be home tonight from Augusta. We'll have the quiz tomorrow. I'll gladly field any questions over email tonight. I'll gladly field any questions tomorrow morning before the quiz if you want to come in, and even before the quiz, the 5-10 minutes before we take it, I'll gladly field any questions too. So it's gonna be a normal quiz, probably a few more short answer, fewer fill in the blanks. So just be able to come and confidently talk about this stuff. And it's the last quiz of the year, so finish strong. I love y'all. Y'all are awesome. I'll see you tomorrow.